The horror road trip. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend getaway, a chance for 4 college friends to escape the pressures of school and enjoy a drive through the open countryside. Sophie, Liam, Jenna, and Mike had planned this trip for months, a break from their busy academic schedules. The route was mapped out, the playlists curated, and the snacks piled high in the back seat of Liam's beat-up old sedan. It was the perfect escape. They had left early Saturday morning, laughing and singing along to the radio as they wound their way out of the city and into the countryside. The weather was perfect for a road trip. Blue skies stretched overhead, with just enough breeze to keep things cool. Miles of farmland and dense forests flanked both sides of the highway, and everything seemed to promise an easy, carefree journey. Around noon, after hours of driving and a stop for lunch at a roadside diner, Liam suggested they take a detour. The main road was smooth, but he had heard from a classmate about a scenic, lesser-known route that wound through the hills. "It'll shave an hour off the trip," he said, punching the location into the car's GPS. The others agreed, intrigued by the idea of taking the path less traveled. They had no reason to believe anything could go wrong. As they turned onto the narrow, gravel road, excitement buzzed through the car. Felt like an adventure. The detour started off picturesque enough. The road was lined with towering trees, their leaves beginning to shift into autumn colors. The occasional farmhouse dotted the landscape, and the gravel crunched pleasantly beneath the tires. But as they drove deeper into the hills, the atmosphere subtly began to change. The road became narrower, the trees denser, blocking out more of the daylight. The sunlight, once warm and golden, now filtered through the canopy in strange, twisted beams, casting long shadows over the road. The GPS lost signal, leaving them with only the direction Liam had punched in earlier. Sophie, sitting in the front passenger seat, glanced at Liam with unease. "You sure we're still going the right way?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. Liam nodded, though his expression was tense. "Yeah, this is right. Just a bit longer and we'll be back on the main road." But the road stretched on. After another half hour, they hadn't passed any houses or other signs of civilization. The gravel road had turned to dirt, with large potholes that made the car bump and shake. The sun, once bright and high, now seemed lower in the sky than it should have been. The trees pressed closer on either side, their twisted branches looking unnaturally gnarled and skeletal. "This doesn't feel right," Jenna said from the back seat, her voice tight with anxiety. "Maybe we should turn around." Mike, sitting next to her, nodded. "Yeah, we haven't seen another car in ages." Liam, trying to remain calm, slowed the car to a crawl and looked for a spot to turn around. The road, however, was too narrow, and dense trees bordered both sides. They had no choice but to continue forward until they could find a wider section. Another 10 minutes passed in strained silence. The atmosphere inside the car had shifted, the once light-hearted mood now heavy with an unspoken fear. Sophie kept checking her phone, hoping for a GPS signal, but there was nothing. Jenna stared out the window, biting her nails, while Mike shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Liam gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white. Finally, they saw something ahead, a break in the trees. Relief washed over them. Maybe there was a clearing or even a place to turn around. But as they got closer, their hopes turned to dread. It wasn't a clearing. It was an old, dilapidated house, standing crooked in a patch of overgrown grass. The windows were dark, and the wood siding was rotting and covered in vines. The roof sagged, and the whole structure looked as though it hadn't been touched by human hands in decades. An eerie stillness hung in the air around it. Liam slowed the car to a stop in front of the house, and for a moment, no one spoke. The place had an unsettling presence, like it was watching them, waiting for something. "Keep going," Sophie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't stop here." Liam didn't argue. He pressed on the gas, but the car sputtered and stalled. He tried the ignition again, but the engine only made a low, choking noise before going completely silent. Panic flashed in his eyes as he turned the key again, this time more forcefully. Nothing. The silence inside the car was deafening. Jenna let out a nervous laugh, the kind of laugh that breaks out when fear becomes too much to contain. "This can't be happening," she muttered. "The car just died?" Mike leaned forward. "Try again." Liam tried once more, but the car remained dead. "Damn it!" he cursed, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. "I don't know what's wrong. It was fine all day." As if on cue, the sky overhead darkened, thick clouds rolling in with unnatural speed. The air grew colder, and a light mist began to rise from the ground. The group exchanged uneasy glances. "We should get out of here," Sophie said urgently, her eyes fixed on the house. "I don't like this." "We can't just walk back," Mike argued. "We don't even know how far we've come." "There has to be someone nearby," Liam said. "Maybe in the house." Jenna shook her head furiously. "No way. That place is creepy as hell. There's no way anyone's lived there in years." Sophie, though terrified, nodded in agreement. "We shouldn't go inside." But Liam, feeling the weight of responsibility for leading them down this path, opened the car door. "I'll just take a quick look," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. "Maybe there's a phone or something." Before anyone could stop him, he was already out of the car, walking toward the house. The others watched, their anxiety mounting with each step he took. The mist clung to his legs as he made his way through the tall grass, and the silence around him felt oppressive. Liam reached the front porch, which creaked under his weight. He hesitated before reaching for the doorknob, but before his hand could touch it, the door swung open on its own with a loud, creaking groan that he froze. The inside of the house was pitch black. He couldn't see more than a few feet beyond the doorway. A foul odor wafted out, thick and cloying, like something rotting. "Liam, come back!" Sophie shouted from the car. Her voice seemed distant, as though the air between them had thickened. But he couldn't move. He stood frozen in place, his heart pounding in his chest. A strange sound began to echo from the darkness inside the house. A soft, wet shuffling, like something dragging itself across the floor. His breath caught in his throat. "Liam!" Sophie's voice was more urgent now, panicked. Something moved in the shadows, just beyond the threshold. He couldn't see it clearly, but it was large, hulking, and unnatural in shape. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his body refused to obey. Suddenly, the figure in the darkness lunged. Liam stumbled back, his legs giving out as he fell hard onto the porch. A grotesque, twisted face emerged from the shadows, its eyes black and empty, its mouth twisted into a wide, unnatural grin. Long, bony arms reached out toward him, fingers ending in sharp, claw-like nails. With a scream, Liam scrambled to his feet and bolted back to the car. The others had already opened their doors, ready to flee on foot if necessary. Sophie's eyes were wide with terror as she grabbed Liam's arm and pulled him into the passenger seat. "What happened?" she demanded, but the words barely left her mouth before they heard it, the shuffling sound growing louder, closer. "We need to go!" Mike shouted. Liam turned the key in the ignition one last time, praying for a miracle. The engine roared to life. Without wasting another second, Liam floored the gas, the car lurching forward. Dirt and gravel flew up behind them as they sped down the road, the mist closing in around the house behind them, and no one spoke for several minutes. The silence in the car filled only by the sound of their heavy breathing and the roar of the engine. They didn't dare look back. The road stretched on endlessly, the dense trees blurring past them. Eventually, the mist began to thin, and the sky cleared once more. The GPS flickered back to life, showing them a route that would lead them back to the highway. Relief flooded the car, but none of them could shake the feeling that they had narrowly escaped something far worse than they could comprehend. When they finally reached a gas station at the edge of town, they pulled over to catch their breath. As they got out of the car, Sophie glanced back down the road, her face pale. "I never want to see that place again," she whispered. The others nodded in agreement. They didn't talk much for the rest of the trip, but each of them knew they had come dangerously close to something they couldn't explain. Something evil. And as they drove away from the hills, they couldn't help but feel like they hadn't truly escaped, that whatever lurked in that house still watched, waiting for the next travelers.